Holstein cow just brings people together, brings people around the world together. We have this common thing, this love for this Holstein cow that is an amazing creature. You have to know that you know your cows better than anybody else and that this is real and you're not alone. We're really excited for where we are. Things are moving forward and we continue to make progress to our end goals of just having a really high producing, high type herd that we can pass on to the next generation.
Welcome to Holstein Connections, where we share the latest stories, insights, and news from Holstein Association USA and beyond. The largest dairy cattle breed association in the world, Holstein Association USA provides leadership, information, and services to help dairy producers worldwide be successful. Whether you're in the barn, on the road, or just tuning in for your dose of dairy news, we're glad you're here. This is Holstein Connections.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Holstein Connections podcast. I'm Sarah Sarbacker, the Director of Sales and Market Development at Holstein Association USA, and joining me today is Jill Nelson of Olmar Farms in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota. Olmar Farms has been breeding and working with Registered Holsteins for over 80 years. They've been a Progressive Breeders Registry herd for 54 years and were recognized with Holstein Association USA's Elite Breeder Award in 2017. Jill and her family have also navigated a long and challenging experience with stray voltage on their dairy, and today she'll share more about that journey and what they've learned along the way. So Jill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah.
So let's start off with a little bit of history about Olmar Farms. So if you could just give us a little bit of background and history on the farm.
Sure. I'm the fifth generation on our farm. My grandfather, Oliver Marty, he is the one who bought the first registered Holsteins back in 1944. We do have some of our cows that are currently in the barn go back to that original purchase. Nearly all of the rest of the cows in the barn go back to a purchase made by my grandpa in 1956. So a lot of the cows in the farm have been with us for the whole ride.
Wow, that's great. What does Olmar Farms look like today?
Well, today we milk 150 registered Holsteins in a freestall barn built in 2010. My husband, Brian, and I run the dairy and the cropping. We've got two boys who are not involved in the farm, and we are currently getting close to starting our own creamery.
Yeah, and we talked just a little bit before we started recording about that process, and sounds like you're just getting going with that. So that sounds exciting. All right. So what are some cows or cow families that have been successful for you over the years on the farm?
I would say the most notable over the years, when I was young, we had the Faithful cow family with Olmar Polybob Faithful. She was the first 300,000 pound cow in the state of Minnesota and had some other big production records at that time. That family still is in the farm. And more recently, it would be the babies, the Bumbles and the Bellas, which all stem from that purchase back in 1956, as well as the Star family. So those are kind of the most notable. The baby Bumble family cows that have come that go back to her would be like that Rosemary Unix Goldie cow. Some cows that have done really well genomically in Europe go back to her. And they've just been a really fun group of cows to work with my entire life.
Yeah, I think that's really great too, that those great cow families stem all the way back to that first purchase. That's really neat. So with your involvement in Holstein USA over the years, what does being a member of the association mean to you and your family?
Well, it's really what has brought the family together around the farm. I don't believe if we were just milking cows that we would have the love for it and the connection with each other. You know, my cousins and my kids and their cousins, and the Holstein cow just brings people together, brings people around the world together. We have this common thing, this love for this Holstein cow that is an amazing creature. That God created these cows that can do things that we never dreamed 20 years ago they could do. The production, the
Mhm.
reproduction. I'm just in awe of the cows, and I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it really is what has drawn us all together as a family.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think we hear that quite a bit, and that's something that we're really proud of as an association too. And like you mentioned with the Holstein cow and how things have changed over the years and the genetic advances is pretty amazing. So in addition to your long history with Registered Holsteins, we also wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about your experience dealing with stray voltage and some of the lessons you've learned through that could potentially help other dairy farmers who might be going through something similar. So if you want to just walk us through, so when did the issue with stray voltage start, and when did you first start noticing things on the farm just weren't quite right?
It was back in 2010 when we were purchasing the farm from my uncle. I just noticed cows weren't coming in the milking parlor very well. It was an old parlor. The cow flow design really wasn't ideal to begin with, but it became more noticeably difficult to get them to come into the parlor, get into their stalls, milk, and go out. And so we had the parlor checked, and the stray voltage expert said, yeah, you definitely have it in the parlor, and it's coming from what they call the primary side or the utility side of the electrical equation on our farm. And so we called the REA. They came out, they tested, they said, no, you don't have a problem. But if you want, if it'll make you feel better, we'll install a neutral blocker, which basically disconnects our farm from the neutral of the utility company. And so that's what they did. And at that time, we were already planning to build a new barn. And so we just figured, all right, let's just get into this new facility, get that up and going, and all of this is just going to go away. It's not a big deal. And so that's what we did. Moved into the new barn in 2010. Had a wonderful honeymoon period where the cows obviously just that improved cow comfort and bigger facility and bigger space, and everything was great. Cows were coming way up in production. And then in 2011, we had an event that the utilities, the power on one of the phases, when we were only in single phase at the time, one of the phases was strobing on and off. So we woke up and every electrical thing that's normally running was going on and off at an alarming pace.
Mhm.
And so basically what that did is that supercharged our barn with current. Our barn was basically acting as a giant capacitor. I should go back a second. When we built the new barn, before we moved any cows in, we had the utilities come back and test again for stray voltage because we didn't want to go into a barn with problems. And their readings, the graphs that they gave us, basically were identical to what we had on our old facility. And so we said, well, since these graphs look identical, should we have a blocker on this facility? Because we ran a completely new electrical service to the new barn, completely disconnected from our old facility. And they said, well, if you want, we'll do that. So we did that. And so we just figured, well, that's going to take care of it. So fast forward back to 2011, basically the wheels began falling off. And we went back to just so many problems of cow behavior in the parlor, kicking, cows lapping at the waterers. Anytime a motor started, you would notice this could be dead of winter, and the cows all eating on the headlocks. If a motor started, you could see them all start flicking their tails like they were covered in flies. But like in the middle of winter, of course, they're not, right? There was just all these signs of there's something wrong. There's some voltage in this barn. We went on and we had several different electricians who had some experience in stray voltage come out. Is there anything we can do? And every one of them always pointed that it's all coming through the ground, earth ground currents, and coming back into your barn that way. And there's nothing that we can do about it because we can't fix the utility side of things. And so for basically 9 years, we did everything we could to we called it whack-a-mole, right? I mean, what we were seeing in the cows, we'd have sudden deaths, we would have just crazy kicking in the parlors. So we were constantly checking every parameter in the milking parlor system to make sure that was all perfect. We were flying in experts on mastitis and on other things to say what else can we do to keep our cows alive, to get them pregnant, because
Right.
everything was going wrong that you can imagine.
What did your production look like? I'm sure milk production dropped.
Well, production would go anywhere from 70 pounds to 90 pounds. So, we'd have an influx because stray voltage isn't a flat line. It comes and goes, especially if it's coming in through the ground current, because depending on how much demand is on that line, sometimes of the year there's more demand. So there's going to be more power that's going into the ground. And so there'd be times where you think, oh, we fixed something, we did something right, and now the cows are back up to 90 pounds. And a month later, you'd have
Mhm.
mastitis and you'd be down to 70 pounds. And then you'd have to cull a whole bunch of cows. And you think, okay, well, now we got back going. And it's a never ending up and down roller coaster of just trying to figure out what else can we do, because you can't force the utility company to fix their problem.
Mhm.
And that's where the issue really lies.
Mhm. Right, and I think there's some data that's been out there for quite some time that they're kind of using to gauge this, that I think some farmers would say, that their cows are feeling and being affected by this at levels that are lower than what that data suggests. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so after we finally got our problem fixed, our cows jumped back up about 15 pounds of milk per cow per day over a 3-month period over the summer. So it was quite obvious what the problem was. We knew what it was, but now finally everyone else said, "Oh yeah, you probably were right." And in doing so, of course, 9 years of these kind of losses, we ended up taking our utility company to court, filing a civil lawsuit to try to recoup some of our losses. What we found out when we went to court was quite startling and really has taken me years to really wrap my head around. I truly believe that, the small local independent or your local REA people probably are just as much in the dark as our industry is, because they get taught by these large utility companies and the researchers. But what we learned when we went to court is that there's been research that's been falsified. And that's the research, of course, that gets pushed in front of any legislators, any public utility commissions. So basically, since the 1980s, this has been going on. And so my entire lifetime, just about, there's been this narrative that's been being written about stray voltage, that it's really not a problem, that cows really aren't affected by it, and that any farmer who's telling you that they have stray voltage, well, they're just a bad farmer. And, our farm has decades of proof to the contrary. Farmers don't wake up overnight and lose all ability to manage their herd. And that's what it feels like when you go through stray voltage. You can go from being a great farmer and doing a lot of things right and having great success, and overnight that's all taken away from you. And so what we did find out was, in the testing that the utility companies do, they're using a 500 ohm resistor. That's the resistance that they say is the worst case scenario for a cow, which means in their minds, that is the lowest resistance that you'll find on a dairy cow. What the actual truth is, and what all of the research has shown, even since the 1970s, is that a cow's resistance is significantly lower than that. Most recent studies that have been done show the average cow is right around that 2 to 220, with many cows testing down around 100 and some even below. Cows maybe that have a sore foot or something are going to have a lower resistance. And so when they're using a 500 ohm resistor, and when it should be more like a 125 ohm resistor, what that does is that changes the voltage that they feel is concerning. Okay, you have the equation. I'm going to get a little sciencey here. The equation volts equals amps times ohms, right? So the resistance is the ohms portion of that. When they come to measure the farm, they're measuring the volts. The other part of that equation is the amps, the current that affects the cows. And again, this is another area where the science tells us that cows will physically react at much, much lower current levels than what the utilities claim that they will react at. And so what they say is it takes 2 milliamps for a cow to feel current, and therefore, really isn't a problem anything below that. Okay, well, if you do the math, you 2 milliamps times 500 ohms, you're looking at 1 volt. So anything lower than 1 volt, the utility company walks away and says, it's not a problem. It's not a level that affects your cows. What we found out when we went to court and when I started researching these papers and reading through expert depositions was quite contrary to that. So there was one study that was done where the claim was that it wasn't until 2 milliamps where a cow would lift her leg or toss her head. But when you looked at the barn notes that were collected on that study, it actually showed that 25% of them reacted at 0.25 milliamps, which is 8 times lower than 2 milliamps. And it also was the lowest that they even tested. I can tell you from my experience on our farm and what the current level was on our farm that I could still see our cows reacting to was even far lower than that. But let's just, for argument's sake, say that 0.25 milliamps is what a cow reacts to on the low side. 0.25 times 125 ohm resistance, now you're looking at 0.03 something volts that is affecting a cow. That's a far cry from 1. And that's why I've been doing what I'm doing, because so many farms are struggling with this. So many farms are destroyed by it. And I couldn't go through what we went through knowing other farms were going through the same thing and not try to help.
Right. And like you said, it's not talked about that much. We don't hear about stray voltage a lot in general, but we know that it's happening on more farms than most people would suspect.
The countdown is officially on for the 2026 National Holstein Convention in Orlando, Florida, held June 22nd through 25th. Join fellow Holstein enthusiasts from across the country for an event packed with education, networking, youth contests, tours, and unforgettable moments that celebrate the Holstein breed and the people behind it. Registration will be available through May 20th. New this year, convention attendees can choose from 2 all-inclusive packages to make it simpler to get the whole convention experience. The 2026 convention has something for everyone, so plan ahead by registering early and securing your place at one of the most anticipated Holstein events of the year. Learn more at holsteinconvention.com. We can't wait to welcome you to the 2026 National Holstein Convention in Orlando, Florida.
And I know that a lot of farmers have reached out to you. How many farmers would you say have reached out to you, Jill, about dealing with similar issues?
Oh, I would say probably 50 who have actually picked up the phone and called me. But through social media, hundreds have made comments that, yeah, we went through this, or my parents went through this. This is why we're not farming. This, it's heartbreaking. And when you get those calls from farmers who've developed amazing herds their entire lives, generational farms that are now losing them because of something they cannot control, is so heartbreaking. I think people in our industry, especially the registered breeder business would be shocked at how many of their friends have struggled with this and they have no idea. Because I've had calls from many people I would have never guessed are dealing with this who have.
For farmers who are listening to this who might be suspecting that something similar is going on their farm, what would your advice be to them, or what signs should they watch for?
The cows don't lie. I mean,
Mhm.
if you read your cows, it's not normal for them to lick and lap and slurp and dunk their head in their water and then stop drinking and go over to a puddle of urine and suck it dry. That is not a normal behavior. Kicking to the point in your parlor where you have to tie their legs together just to get any milk out of them, that's not a normal behavior.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of, there's a lot of things like that's the worst of it. But when it's not even that bad, there's still a lot of nuances, just cows jumping across the threshold. If you've got an equipotential plane, in theory, they're supposed to keep the potential on every inch of that floor and that barn exactly the same. Well, the reality is no equipotential plane is perfect. Anytime you stop and start a pour, you're going to have a different equipotential or different potential. And if the cow's got 2 feet on one side of that and 2 feet on the other side, they're going to feel that difference in potential, and that current is going to hit them. That's why you see them jumping across. For us, they were jumping into the parlor. And again, cow behavior doesn't lie. You can blame every other problem. You can blame reproduction. You can blame poor production. You can blame poor health on a million different management things, but you cannot cause a cow to act funny like that. And
Mhm.
so that's what you need to be watching for. The only way that we made it through is because we were constantly looking for ways to improve our management to just make sure we did everything we could. But you cannot manage your way out of this. And more really good farms that are being affected by this are realizing that this is not somebody's excuse. This is a real thing that is absolutely devastating.
Right. If there's a farmer out there who, they've been noticing these signs, they're pretty sure this is what it is, what would you tell them as far as the next steps to try to get some resolution on this in their
Right.
herd?
So you have to have your utility involved, but I would say document everything. I want to believe that the more we start pushing back as an industry, that the more the local people are going to say, yeah, there must be something going on here and let's fix it. I don't think we're to that point yet because they're still being told by their power suppliers how to handle things. But document everything so that you can show them. You can say, look, this day you started up a new transformer or you put in something down the line or whatever. And from that day on, we've had these problems. Or just having good records, which, one of our saving graces was that we've got every DHIA record since the beginning of DHIA
Mhm.
and our herd. So we had lots of proof to show all of the, what you would call normal ebbs and flows of a dairy farm, but what even the utility side of the, in the courtroom will acknowledge a normal growth of production should be. And when you're not matching what industry standards are on that, and there's no other explanation, at some point they're going to have to realize, all right, let's just fix the problem. And as an industry, we need to get there. As an individual farmer, if you're seeing things, again, document, contact a stray voltage expert, but be very careful. They are not going to come cheap because the equipment that they use is very, very expensive because they want to be able to record everything and not just get a snapshot of one day. Part of the problem that with utilities and the way they test, their equipment is designed again with that 500 ohm resistor, but it's also designed to average periods of time. So when they show you a graph and they show you the cow contact voltage line and it's a nice flat line, well, every point on that line could be an average of 5 seconds or 10 seconds or even up to 20 seconds. Well, that takes all of the spikes because the motor starts is what really can load up your barn, and make it into this giant capacitor. It's adding to the current that's in your barn. And those motor starts are milliseconds long. And so you need equipment that will register those spikes because every spike is adding to your potential on your equipotential plane. And so you need to find a qualified stray voltage expert. But, you find the right person who has the right pull with the utility companies and know how to talk to them and compel them to work with you to fix things. In our case, we needed to bring three-phase to the farm. We moved our transformer 100 yards away from any of our buildings, and we installed an isolated transformer. Those three things combined, and the current on our farm is now pretty much nothing. But we do monitor it. There's systems you can set up to monitor if anything were to be on your neutral line on your farm. You can put in these systems. And what we've noticed with those, every once in a while, if you have a motor that starts to go bad, it'll actually show up on that system much sooner than the motor actually failing. And so we can go replace that motor and be on our way and continue on. So there's some things you can do, but you got to be strong. You have to know that you know your cows better than anybody else, and that this is real and you're not alone.
That there's
All
others
those
who've
things.
gone through it and are willing to help. Yeah. Jill, through your experience, you put together a website with information on stray voltage that people can go to, correct?
Yes, because I had so many phone calls and I was feeling like a repeating person here. I decided I'm going to just put it all on a website. It's called www.strayvoltagefacts.com. That website basically explains what I've been talking about here today. It also has a lot of expert testimony. It has a lot of court documents. And I really wanted to just stick to the facts and not play on people's emotions, even though it's a very emotional issue. But I just wanted to get the facts out there so that farmers had a place to learn and understand, that industry people, if they're willing to look, could learn and understand and help their customers, just to get the facts out there.
That's amazing that you put together that resource. So thank you for doing that and doing what you do to help others that are going through this. How's your herd doing today?
Oh, they're doing good. We cracked that 30,000 pound rolling herd average last year on a twice a day milking. So I'm pretty excited about
Mhm.
that and pretty proud of the girls. We're building the cow families back up through the stray voltage. We just lost a lot of great cows way, way too young. So there's, some of those, what us breeders call holes in the pedigrees, where cows just didn't get a chance to shine. So we're building back those cow families. And
Good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Jill. I know it's, like you said, it's an emotional issue, but I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done on this and all the other farmers that you've helped as they're navigating this. And hopefully that we've provided some information for listeners today that can help them if they think they may be dealing with a stray voltage issue. And as always with our podcast, we like to wrap up with some would you rather questions. So I'm just going to ask you a few fun little questions, Jill, just to get to know you a little bit better. So they're really easy. So would you rather drink chocolate or strawberry milk?
chocolate.
Okay. And would you rather exhibit at a local or national Holstein show?
Oh, oh gosh, that's a hard one. They both are so different. I love them both.
We'll take that. We'll take that. Barn cat or farm dog?
I don't know. I love my dogs. I don't know. I gotta go dogs this time.
Okay. And then black and white or red and white Holsteins?
Oh, anybody who knows me knows black and white all the way. No offense.
And then our last one is, would you rather do field work or barn chores?
Oh, barn chores. Keep me out of a tractor.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for taking time to join us today and for being willing to share both the successes on your operation and the challenges that your family has experienced. And we also want to just thank you for your continued involvement with Holstein Association USA.
Thank you for
And to
having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Holstein Connections. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and share.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Holstein Connections. Whether you're in the barn, on the road, or just tuning in for your dose of dairy news, we're glad you're here. Until next time, this is Holstein Connections.